final closing.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America.
Is that what they asked?
I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses.
That's incredible. Wow.
My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy.
You don't know anything,
My
girl.
opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before,
Hello.
which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
Unreal.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again.
Eyes on your own paper,
We are
Kamala.
going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy.
Oh, really? Wow.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us.
What?
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
Girl, what?
Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century.
During the
Donald
pandemic?
Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Oh, wow.
And what we have done is clean up Donald
Wow.
Trump's mess. What we have done
You didn't
and what
do
I
nothing.
intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes
Girl.
of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies,
You?
grievances, and name calling.
Oh, wow.
What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025
Oh, my
that the
God,
former
no way.
president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us.
Oh, shut
And
up.
I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President
don't
Trump will
want
give you
you.
a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up
lady
with
here.
some ideas. I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic.
Yeah.
And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible.
Okay, stop talking about
and
the
people
pandemic.
give me credit for rebuilding the
Enough.
military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the
Okay,
pandemic.
all right,
but
moving
the
on.
only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
Are we just responding back and
So,
forth? No more questions? What the
Donald
fuck?
Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about
Girl,
tax
what?
breaks for the richest people.
So that's a plan,
I am
then.
offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and
Girl,
the
shut up.
best economists in our country, if not the world,
Oh, wow.
have reviewed
Not
our
the world.
relative plans for the future of America.
Doubt it.
What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy.
No, girl.
What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit.
Oh, my
16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would
Girl.
invite a recession.
Have they?
You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know
No.
that Donald Trump actually has
refuse
no
that
plan for
invitation.
you because he is more interested in
invite you to
defending
know?
himself
What is
than
that?
he is in looking out for you.
I would invite you to know, ma'am, that you can go fuck yourself.
I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top
I'd
professors,
invite you to
think my
know.
plan is a
The
brilliant
fuck?
plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to
Oh,
be
my
able
God.
to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower
Not
taxes.
run, spot, run.
She doesn't have a plan. Take a
I'm
look at her plan.
dead.
She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up.
Oh, drill down
the Vice
on it.
President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America.
Answer
He
the
invited
question,
trade wars.
woman.
You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China
my God.
to help them improve and modernize their military.
Oh, really?
Basically sold us out, when a
Oh
policy
my
about
God,
China
you're
should
gonna
be
say-
in making
really?
sure the United States
Wow.
of America wins the competition
Girl.
for the 21st century, which
Hello?
means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump
Workers'
did, let's talk
rights.
about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi
Oh, did
for
he?
what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know
not the
that
exclamation
Xi was
point.
responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
And what
President
are you
Trump
going
will
to do
let
about
you
it, lady?
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected,
Do
she'd
it.
change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist.
Yep.
Her father's a Marxist professor in
doesn't
economics.
even like her.
And he taught her well.
Let's be real.
But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly,
Look at her face.
where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people
Yep.
coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have,
Whoever
and she
told her to
has
smile like this
destroyed
should be
our
fired.
country
She looks
with
silly.
policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President
here
Trump,
we
you've
go.
often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud
not
to
about
be
as
the
killing
most
babies, so
pro-life
there's that.
president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need
Girl, that
more than
mustache, you
6
could've
weeks.
shaved that
But
before you came
then
on
the
TV.
very next day, you
Girl.
reversed course and said you would vote to
What is
support the
that?
6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's an execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald
cares?
Reagan did also.
Oh, wow.
85% of Republicans do.
Not Ronald
Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response
Shut the hell
to President
up,
Trump.
bitch.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact.
What?
Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States
Well, at
Supreme
least she
Court
admitted
with
that
the
it was a
intention
baby, you
that they
know?
would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly
Ooh,
as
that
he
voice cracking.
intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans.
Good.
Which make it criminal
Good.
for a doctor or nurse to provide health care.
wow.
In one state, it provides prison for life.
Oh, that's one of those lies you're talking
Trump
about, ma'am?
abortion bans that make no exception
Wow.
even for rape and incest, which understand what that means.
that one of those lies?
A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral.
To kill the baby, you
And
mean?
one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government
Ma'am,
and Donald Trump certainly
have no
should
faith,
not be
though.
telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted?
Yeah.
Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency
What are
room
you
because the
fucking
healthcare
talking
providers
about?
are afraid they might go to jail, and
Girl.
she's bleeding out in a car in the parking
Liar.
lot. She didn't want that.
Liar.
Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term.
Oh, wow.
They don't want that.
Girl,
And I
shut
pledge
up.
to you, when Congress
better
passes
have
a
a good
bill
comeback for this,
to
dude,
put
I
back
swear.
in place the protections of Roe v. Wade,
He
as
better
President of the United
answer
States, I
good
will
to this.
proudly sign it
Such lies.
into law.
Such
But
lies.
understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban.
Fearmonger.
Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion
They just
a
gotta let her
monitor
keep
that would be
lying.
monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages.
Somebody
I
needs
think
to
the
correct
American
her.
people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's
Absolutely
own
fucking
body,
not.
should not be made by the
They
government.
need to not
Thank
let her
you,
get away
Vice
with that. That's
President Harris.
bullshit.
Well, there she goes again. It's
Yeah,
a
thank
lie.
you, thank you.
I'm not signing a ban, and there's no
Ridiculous
reason to
shit.
sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else,
Ridiculous.
and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country
He needs to
apart.
answer to the
and
shit
they've
she
wanted
said.
it
Come
back
on.
in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What
People
she
aren't
says
getting
is
abortions
an
over
absolute
incest and
lie.
rape.
And as
They're
far as the
not.
abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban.
They're
but it doesn't
aborting
matter
healthy
because
babies because
this
they don't wanna
issue
have
has
them.
now been taken over by the states.
Ridiculous.
Would you veto a
Horrible
national
answer.
abortion ban if it came
Well, I
to
will
Horrible
have to
answer.
because, again, two
On the
things.
defense.
Number one, she said she'll go
He
back
needs
to
to go on
Congress. She'll never
offense.
get the vote. It's
This is
impossible for her to
ridiculous.
get the vote, especially now with the
Ridiculous.
50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So
Still
it's just
on
talk.
defense.
You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running
No,
mate,
ma'am. Go
J.D.
shave your
Vance, has
mustache.
said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans.
True.
They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get
Ooh,
it
she's
out
mad
of
now.
Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
No.
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade.
What does that
And
mean?
as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term
Lies.
and asking for an abortion. That is
Lies.
not happening. It's insulting to the women of America.
It's not
and understand what
insulting
has
to
been
me. Don't
happening
speak for
under
me.
Donald Trump's abortion bans.
Girl.
Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working one or two jobs.
What are you talking
who can
about?
barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state
Girl.
to get on a plane sitting next to strangers
Oh, not
to go and
strangers.
get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable.
Oh.
And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her
Why-
that question?
why don't you
That's
answer
the
the
problem.
question? Would you
Because
veto?
under
Shut
Roe
up,
v.
lady.
Wade,
Answer the question,
you
would you
could-
I thought
they were
you
supposed
could
to be
do
muted. What's
abortions
happening?
in
What's
the
happening?
7th
What's going
month,
on?
the 8th month, the
Y'all
9th month,
unmuted her
and
so she could talk
probably
shit?
after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border
Yeah.
security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans,
just so
Democrats, voters
aggravating.
across the board in
God.
this country. Vice
Horrible.
President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America.
Border
We know
czar.
that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly.
Have they?
But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have
Yeah.
done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations
fucking deal. No
for the
one cares.
trafficking of guns,
No one
drugs,
cares.
and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job.
Girl.
It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country.
care.
That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
As an unelected
and
person,
understand,
he did that all by
this
himself.
comes
Wow.
at a time
Wow.
where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions.
Then what are you doing
Who
here?
actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to
Bitch, what?
watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter.
Girl,
He will
hello?
talk about
Can you
windmills
get it?
cause cancer.
This is ridiculous.
And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
Hello.
And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve
I'd
a
invite
president
you to
who
know,
actually
ma'am,
puts
that you're
you
full of
first.
shit,
And I
again.
pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris,
Girl.
thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to
Golly.
kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put
How
thousands
can
of
he do
additional
that?
agents
How
and
can he do
officers on
that?
the border.
First, let me respond
He's
to the
unelected.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be
Yeah,
there.
thank you.
And then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country. And it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific
saw the
claims of pets
picture.
being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well,
All
I've
this-
seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
The
saw
people on
it.
television say
clear-
my dog was taken and used for food.
Bitch,
so
not the
maybe he
dogs.
said that, and maybe that's a good
Yeah.
thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But
television.
the people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
We saw it.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
Talk about extreme.
You know,
Girl.
this is,
Go
I
to
think, one
hell.
of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement
Oh, do you?
of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney,
Dick Cheney.
and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member
bitch.
Liz Cheney.
Ooh, not you
And
bragging
if
over
you
that.
want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people.
Yeah.
Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher.
Who cares?
Take us through this.
Let's
What
get
does
them
this
out.
look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Hopefully.
It is much
I think
higher
so.
because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come
know how
in,
to
drug
find 'em.
dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime.
Yes.
It was a fraud.
Thank
Just like
you.
their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted
What?
for
Bitch, what?
national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference,
Oh, wow.
has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal
You got a lot of
sentencing.
nerve, bitch.
And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts.
You have a lot of nerve, lady.
So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent.
Yep.
And I'm winning most of them, and I
Yep.
will win the rest on appeal.
Yep.
And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York, every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them
criminals.
go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out.
Yes.
It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the
No,
context in
answer
which
the
this
question.
election in 2024 is taking place.
Dumb bitch.
The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States.
Answer
that he
the
would
question.
weaponize the Department of Justice against his
Stop
political
lying.
enemies.
Like you did?
Someone who has openly expressed disdain
Oh my God,
for
this is
members of our
crazy.
military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president,
Yes.
This is the one that weaponized,
Interrupt her.
not me. She weaponized.
Right,
I
thank
probably
you.
took a bullet to the
Thank
head
you.
because of the things that they say about
Thank
me.
you.
They talk about
Interrupt the lady.
democracy. I'm a threat
Yes.
to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a
President
fake
Trump.
Russia
Yes.
investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get-
went nowhere.
We
Shut
have
up.
a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice
Don't
President
interrupt him.
Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your
That was
campaign
good.
says
I
you
like
don't.
that he did that.
You
That was
supported
good.
decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know
Bullet
you
to the
say that
damn
your
head.
values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up.
Girl.
I intend to be that president.
President Trump,
will
Well, first of all, I
President.
wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Yes!
She went out.
Yes! He
She
used
went
it
out
before she did!
in Minnesota
I'm dead!
and wanted to let criminals
That's
that
great.
killed
That
people,
was kick.
that burned
That was
down
kick.
Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end
You're
on
all
day one.
fracked.
Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we
Shut
have
up,
a
shut up,
lot of
lady.
issues
Things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment.
to.
They
My
should
man
have
is
done.
talking,
Thank you.
ma'am.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in
quiet.
just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them.
Peacefully
The
march.
country and the world
Peacefully
saw what
march.
played out at the Capitol that day, the officers
Why don't you
coming under attack.
say it like it
Aides in the
was?
West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
No.
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when
Let
are
him
those
finish,
people going to be
David.
prosecuted? When are
Let
the
him
people
finish,
that
David.
burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they
you.
took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
No.
Yes,
You
sir.
I
didn't do
had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker
Shut up.
Pelosi, but I
Just
do
shut
want
up.
Vice
Go
President
on,
Harris
David.
to respond.
Go on. Move on.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th.
Oh, wow.
I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital,
Oh, my God, no.
to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured,
What?
and some died.
No, they didn't. No, they
And
didn't.
understand, the former president has been
Liar.
indicted and impeached for exactly that reason.
Liar.
But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate.
Oh, my God.
And what did the president then at the time
Anti-Semitism?
say? There were fine people on each side.
Oh, here we go.
Let's remember.
Here we go.
That
This is all
when
these
it came
people
to
have
the
is
Proud Boys, a
lies.
militia,
All they have is lies.
the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by.
That was epic, too.
So for everyone watching
was
who
epic.
remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back.
January 6th
Let's
was
not
awesome,
go back.
so-
We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place
wasn't.
in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos.
Yeah, you can
And
stand
to
right next to Dick
end
Cheney.
the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath. If this and
Lies.
the outcome of this
More
election is
lies.
not to his liking,
This,
let's
are
turn the
people not
page on
tired
this.
of this?
Let's not go back. Let's chart a course
Are people really
for
not
the
tired of their
future
bullshit?
and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
Crazy.
It
Yeah,
was
David,
a
let him
different
answer.
term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura
Millions
Ingraham,
of times.
Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still
She
bring it
knows
up,
that.
just like they bring 2025
She
up.
knows it.
They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration
Yes.
here tonight. I do want
That
to
was
focus
good.
on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in
No, I
2020?
don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say that.
sarcastically.
But
You know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker.
Yeah, get a
that was
clue,
said
David.
sarcastically. Look,
Understand
there's so much
sarcasm,
proof.
maybe?
All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about it. An election is fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls we need, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this,
like an idiot,
you and your
so.
allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No
Republican.
judge looked at it.
And said there
they
was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you
Yes.
imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing.
Right.
That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what?
All the
that
facts.
doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right
No,
now
that's good.
is we have a nation in decline.
Thank you. Yeah,
and
let's
they
not
have put it into
rehash it.
decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President,
Amen.
thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't
Yeah,
say
the
that he lost
president.
by whiskers. So he
Yep.
still believes he did not lose the election.
that's right.
That was won by President Biden
2020 was
and
stolen.
yourself.
Yep.
But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about
Are
this
you
upcoming
serious?
election just weeks away. He said, when I
Is this
win,
real?
those people who cheated, and then he lists donors,
Is this
voters,
real?
election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law,
Yeah.
which will include long-term prison sentences.
And?
One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Retard
Donald
shit,
Trump
bro.
was fired by 81 million people.
Go away.
So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that.
Oh, no.
But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States.
You haven't even gone to Mexico.
And world leaders are laughing at Donald
or
Trump.
Europe, actually.
I have talked with military
Oh, are
leaders,
they?
some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a
Ooh.
disgrace.
Oh, my gosh.
And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over
He
and
should
over
bring up
again
Montel
are court
Williams and
cases you
Willie
have
Brown.
lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament
Girl.
or the ability to not be confused about
boy.
fact.
Yeah, you would
That's
know.
deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say
Bring
about
up
world
Biden.
leaders.
Bring up Biden.
Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men. They call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him.
He needs to
North
bring up
Korea
how she
was
lied
afraid of
about
him.
Biden being
Look
a
at what's
retard.
going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden
Putin
put it back on
endorsing
day one, but he
Kamala?
ended the XL pipeline.
Bring it up.
The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world.
Okay,
Look,
come on, dude.
Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most
Who
feared
cares?
person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man
Thank
that
you.
you saw at a debate just a few months ago,
Thank you.
that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million
Yes!
votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy.
Yes!
He got 14 million votes,
Thank
and they
you.
threw him out of office.
Woo!
And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when
Yes!
she ran, She was the first one to leave because she
Oh, my
failed.
God.
And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm
President,
okay with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I
up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more
Yes.
to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and
Yes.
the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected.
Why is Israel a
must do
fucking
more to
topic?
protect
I
innocent
need to
civilians.
know.
You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000
God, who
Palestinians
cares?
are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
She wouldn't.
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers.
You don't care.
What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately.
How are you gonna
and the
do
way it will
it?
end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages
Answer
out.
the
And so we
question.
will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock,
my
also
gosh.
understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution.
Holy
And
mother of
in
God.
that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians.
Israel doesn't want
But the
a
one thing
two-state
I will
solution.
assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order
She
to get
didn't
the
even answer that
hostages out
question.
and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions.
Don't
I
say
hope
that.
I'm
You're
wrong
gonna get
about
people
that one.
excited.
She hates Israel.
Please
At the
don't say
same
that.
time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because
Whoa.
the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people.
Girl?
He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he
can,
said
so,
when
I mean-
Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant.
Well,
It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un.
that's hot.
And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so
Putin
clear.
just endorsed you,
They
lady.
can manipulate
I hope he brings
you
that up. I pray
with
he brings that up.
flattery and favors.
I pray he brings it
And
up.
that is why
Oh my God, please.
so many military leaders who you have worked
Please.
with have told me you are a disgrace.
Girl,
That
they didn't
is
tell you
why
shit.
we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
And she's the one that caused it. That's weak on national security by allowing every nation last
Please
month
bring up
for the
Putin
year,
endorsing her.
168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week.
Yes!
Said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it. Because what he's gotten away with is
Hey!
absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me.
Amazing.
The leaders
Beautiful.
of other countries think that
That's
they're
amazing.
weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank
Shut up,
you. We
lady.
have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News
my
presidential
God, that was
debate from
good.
the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
This debate is so dishonest. It's crazy. It's crazy to me. They aren't bringing up any of the issues that actually people care about. You know, it's like every single time we have to have a debate question that they spend 15 minutes on about freaking Israel, okay? And like, I get foreign policy is a thing or whatever, and, you know, that chain needs to be broken. Like, honestly, the power that the Israel lobby has over our politics has to be destroyed. But that's, I mean, regardless of the point. Why aren't we talking about any of the failures of the Biden administration, which Kamala Harris is the incumbent for and is currently trying to distance herself from? It's just so biased. And she's allowed to get up there and just lie and just say shit, bring up old talking points that they've tried to, you know, marry to Trump for years now. Both good people on both sides. Talking about people died on January 6th. These are all debunked lies. You know, I'm not saying like Trump hasn't said anything false or said anything that was over exaggerating, but we all know how he is. And I don't think he's lied on anything that's been like a major thing that's been debunked. You know, and a lot of times he's saying shit that's like, you know, out of being sarcastic or whatever. But, you know, I don't really care so much about any of the sarcasm or any of the, you know, funny things that he says. If you were to, like, lie about something that's, like, just so blatantly been disproven, that's one thing. But they're just allowing Kamala Harris to sit up there and say that. And even the moderators, when it came to the abortion thing, they're just repeating things that aren't true or trying to cover up for things that Trump's saying that are true. I mean, about, like, there's no 9-month abortions happening in this country. I beg to differ. I beg to freaking differ, okay? There absolutely are. But it is an issue for the states. That's what the country was built on, was having states decide on their own laws. We don't need to have all this federal power and all of this federal jurisdiction when our country's so big that there's no plausible way to legislate things like that. So yes, it belongs to the states. It's just ridiculous. I mean, I think he's doing okay. You know, I think he's doing pretty good. Obviously, she is who she is. So, I think her performance is also relatively okay for being a half-dead retard idiot. You know, like, she's obviously more engaged than Biden ever could hope to be. But it's just crazy the amount of bullshit spewing out of her mouth and just trying to attack based on what she knows to be our blatant lies. So it's dishonest, and it's a way to try to manipulate people who don't really know what's going on, and just trying to get things out into the public sphere that she knows will stick with certain people because they're conjecture, and they're just exaggerated lies. So, I mean, I don't know. Will this debate even like actually make a difference? Who's to say? I think somebody said he needs to challenge her at the very end to 2 more debates, and I agree. Call that bitch out on live television, and he needs to start calling her out on a lot more. You know, which he's starting to finally do, but it's like he needs to go after her, like hardcore attack her policies, attack all of her lies, attack all of the things that we know that she has said and done in the past. You know, hopefully he's like up to date on all of these things. I'm so glad he said that thing about Putin because, I mean, first of all, it's just true. I think Putin was obviously joking. I think he was being, you know, listen, I kind of like Putin, okay? I do. It's a, you know, not many people want to hear that. Not many people like that. But I don't care. I think Putin's keck, and I think he was doing that as a way to be funny, and he was doing that because he knew that, like, he was giving, like, it was like a little breadcrumb, and people probably don't like that. People probably don't like that. Oh, it's Russian interference. I don't care. I think it was a bad signal, if you will. And I like that Trump answered the signal, okay, because he did endorse Kamala Harris. I think it's a way to be funny, yes, but still, he did endorse her, and I think that's Kim Jong-un should come out and endorse her too. I think they should. I think you really should. I think that'd be funny, because they know if she wins, this idiotic woman, that they're really going to be able to do whatever the hell they want to do. So of course they're going to endorse her and want her to win. Of course. It makes sense. It makes total sense.
Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries.
That is so
you have
stupid
said
to me.
you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
Nope.
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more.
Ridiculous.
Because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president?
He's dead.
We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, Do you believe it's in the
So
U.S. best
funny.
interest for Ukraine to win this war? Yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
Yes.
All right.
Negotiate
Agreed.
a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice
Agree.
President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
And girl, barely.
I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not
so.
who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky
Did you?
a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to define
You mean like
one
how
of the
y'all
most
did in
important
2014?
international rules and norms,
You mean like
which
that?
is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity.
You mean like
And
that?
I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself.
Are you allowed to do that
Days
now?
later, I went to NATO's eastern flank,
Is she even
to
allowed to do
Poland
that?
and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided,
just naming things
Ukraine
now?
stands as an independent and free country. If
And
Donald
how much
Trump
money
were
have we
president,
spent?
Putin would be sitting in
Stupid
Kyiv right
woman.
now. And understand what that would mean, because
God.
Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European
for other
allies and our
people's
NATO allies
borders, but
are
not
so
ours.
thankful that
Ridiculous.
you are no longer president,
God.
and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have
NATO's
done
gay
to
and retarded.
preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with
Ridiculous.
Poland. And why don't you tell
So
the
ridiculous.
800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania
So
how quickly
ridiculous.
you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Oh my God.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour.
Yeah, let him respond.
I wanted her to respond to
David.
something you said earlier, and I'll,
Oh no.
please, I'll give you a minute here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you better.
Putin would be sitting in
You fucking
Moscow,
better.
and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet,
Ma'am,
please.
shut up. Shut
he
up.
would have been sitting in
Sit your ass
Moscow,
down, ma'am.
much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later.
Vice
And
President-
that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country.
Facts.
But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fella. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look
No.
out for our friends
No.
and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President
you
of the
gonna cry?
United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a
cry.
president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Yes.
He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
She does.
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that
Girl.
endless war.
Are you kidding?
And as of
We're
today,
paying for 2
there's
more.
not one
Dumbass.
member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we
Leather-bound
honor
books.
the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this
Hello?
former president,
Yeah, you better watch
as
yourself,
president, invited them
Watch yourself.
to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military,
No, here we go,
fallen
another lie,
soldiers,
another lie.
and the work that we must do to uphold
Here it
the
comes.
strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed.
I love this
We
story.
did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it.
They
The
did.
agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on
Look,
now
she's
to race
stunned.
and politics
She's
in this country.
stunned.
Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote,
Are
I
you
didn't know she
kidding?
was black
Do-
until a
is
number of
this
years
what
ago
people care
when she
about?
happened to turn black,
Are you
and now she
kidding
wants
me
to be
right
known
now?
as black. I want to
This
ask
is
a
a
bigger
real
picture
debate
question here
question?
tonight. Why do you believe it's
Unbelievable.
appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
Unbelievable.
I don't, and I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care what she is.
No one cares.
I don't care.
No one gives
You
two
make a big
shits.
deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I
asking.
don't know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black.
Do people
And
care?
that's okay.
I don't think
Either
anyone
one was
gives a
okay
shit.
with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that
Yeah.
we have
A tragedy?
someone who
Really?
wants to be president who has
You're what?
consistently, over the course of his career,
She didn't practice this answer.
attempted to use race to divide the American people.
So
You know,
came
I
up with-
do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And
Here
let's
comes her
remember
rhetoric. Here comes her fucking
how
rhetoric.
Donald Trump started. He was a
Hello.
land. He owned land. He owned
was a land?
buildings, and he was investigated
flabbergasted.
because he refused to rent property to black families.
Flabbergasted.
Let's remember, this is the
Lies.
same individual
Another
who
lie.
took out a full-page ad in the New York Times
Another lie.
calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up,
I
Lindsay.
want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond
We don't
briefly.
care.
Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country.
No, you don't.
One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a
she's getting
sense of
mad.
optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's turn
Trump,
back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She
please.
has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay. Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I just need
gonna move
respond
on.
one
Vice
at a
President
time
Harris.
to what
Shut
he
up,
has
President
lady.
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have
For the
failed
love
to
of God,
accomplish
do it
that.
this time.
You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do
Ew.
something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan.
Shut
I'm
up.
not president right now.
Yeah,
But if
exactly.
we come up with
Dumbass.
something, I would only change it if we come up with
God.
something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So
God.
stop with the continuous lying about this
Scary.
stuff.
Girl, shut up.
As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, let's just
Absolutely
look at the
not.
history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged
Boo.
as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was
Yeah.
an American hero. The late, great John
well.
McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President
prologue
Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance
shut up, lady.
that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat.
No one cares.
The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax.
It is a hoax.
And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue.
Well, they're
and I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An
Thank you.
historic night,
Outside
this
of our
ABC
misery.
News presidential debate
My God.
from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Wow. This is just ridiculous.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
I can't. I mean, it's like the moderators. This was just so biased. I mean, I don't even know if we'll ever get a true debate between these two people because, and one where like they're both sides are being called out. Like, can we just have that? Can we just have truth and like, you know, honesty in our politics ever again? I don't think so. Probably not. It's just a joke at this point. We really are. I mean, absolutely the laughingstock of the world. And I mean, it's not to say that like the world has like all these like fair and free, you know, great democracies or great governments or whatever the case may be, but it's like we try to put on like it's this wonderful thing that we have here, and then you see things like this where like this, I mean, these moderators won't even call her out on anything. And I just don't understand why. I don't understand why. Every question has been about, you know, making Donald Trump answer for this, that, or the other thing when he's not even president right now. She's the one who has the power. She's the one who is the vice president to Joe Biden. Supposedly got 81 million votes in a stolen election. So why are they not answering for anything, any of their policies? It's just ridiculous at this point to bring up anything that Trump did or said during his time as president, because it doesn't matter anymore. That was almost 4 years ago. So, like, why aren't we talking about what's happening now? That's what I would want to know. But I think in his closing statement, he needs to call out the bias of the moderators. He needs to challenge her to another debate and make her answer for it. And then, you know, he needs to just, like, call her a slut or something. I don't know. That would be epic. He was not going to do that, but that would be really funny. And then, you know, just... I don't know, just really drive home his points and his messaging and get back some of the base, you know, the trust that his base has had in him that's been kind of lost recently by, you know, really just hammering home what it is that people actually care about. Nobody gives a shit about, do people give a shit about climate change? Drop it in the comments, guys. Do y'all care about climate change? Because I could give a absolute shit less. And first of all, climate change, like, we're not controlling the earth, okay? I'm sorry. Climate change might be real, but that has nothing to do with us, okay? The earth is going to do what the earth wants to do. It's been here a lot longer than we have, and it's going to be here a lot longer after we're gone. So what are we doing? We think we're going to control what the earth does with its own climate? It's just retard stuff. It's a way for the government to control people. It's a way for them to tax people. And it's a hoax in that there's nothing we can do about it, okay? So it makes no sense to put in policies or taxes on people about climate change, okay, when there's really not much that we can do in terms of policy, laws, or any kind of regulations that will affect climate change in the slightest. Look at Canada. Canada has put in all these regulations, and it has not helped one bit, okay? If anything, I believe I read somewhere that their carbon footprint is higher than it was before they implemented some of these, like, heavy-duty regulations that are hurting people. That's all it does is hurt people. So I hope he really, you know, brings it home with this closing statement, because this debate was obviously biased. I think he did good, though. I don't think that, like, he said anything that was bad, or I don't think that there was any moments where Kamala Harris like owned him, or she just sounded like a dumbass. In my opinion, people who like Kamala Harris are going to like her. People who like Donald Trump are going to like him. I don't see how this debate has moved the needle for anybody, especially like the independents or the undecided that people are really, you know, seeking. But, and I honestly don't understand how anybody can be undecided at this point, but apparently there are a lot of people who are. And whether or not it moves their opinion or not, I couldn't tell you, because it doesn't move mine, obviously. But Kamala Harris is a ridiculous woman. We will never be respected with a woman running this country. We never will. And people need to come to terms with that. If you're so desperate to have a woman as the United States Vice President, really ask yourself, are we going to be respected on our world stage with that kind of thing happening? No, we won't. Okay? Sorry.
David Muir, and Lindsay
called facts
Davis.
and reality.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
Right.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country.
We haven't heard
One
yours,
that
ma'am.
is focused on the future,
No, absolutely.
and the
not.
other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we
That's
can
her- that's her
chart a
line of the
new
night,
way
isn't it?
forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a
All
DA,
about
I
abortion.
was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell
Oh,
you, as a
God.
prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves
you okay?
first.
Ma'am?
I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President
That was
Trump.
horrible for closing statement.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it?
Thank
She's
you!
been there for
Finally!
3.5 years.
Finally!
They've had 3.5 years to fix the border.
Thank you.
They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done
Finally.
it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you
Yes.
haven't done it,
Amen,
and you
brother.
won't do it because
Yes.
you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things
Yes,
that
keep
are going
lying
to
on
make
her.
this country
Yes.
strong, whether you like
If
it
she
or
can do
not.
it, so can you.
Germany tried that, and within 1 year they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it?
Yep.
We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world.
Yep,
All over
yep,
the world,
yep.
they're laughing. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to
Russia.
end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban.
Yes.
She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
Amen.
President
that was good.
Trump, thank you.
That was a good
is
one.
Our
Yes!
ABC News
Leave it with the
presidential
last
debate
word.
from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution
like
Center.
that.
I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all
people
over the
are a
world,
joke.
and from all of us here at ABC News. Good
So,
night.
I mean, he had a better closing statement than she did, for sure. For sure.
And we are here live on ABC with
Did
our
she have notes?
post-debate
Was
comments.
that no-
I'm
excuse
Martha
me?
Raddatz. It was a lively
Did
debate
she have
from
fucking
the
notes?
economy
What
to
was that?
abortion to
was that?
Afghanistan. They had it all,
Ridiculous.
and it was historic.
You can shut the hell up, ma'am. So, yeah, a joke. I don't know. Did that move anybody's needle, guys? Let me know in the comments. But I think it was an absolute, total, just performative shit show, in my opinion. Trump did pretty good. These things are never going to be fair towards him. We know this. But I think for the most part, he handled himself and he tried to debunk all of her lies as best he could. But she was just saying so many of them that it's really impossible. So I think people know that. Hopefully people know that. Hopefully people could see the difference and understand that in order to have strength as a country, we have to have a male in that leadership position. I just think that is what it is. People don't have to like that to understand reality and to understand that in order to deal with people like Vladimir Putin, who just openly laughed at Kamala Harris the other day by giving her his endorsement, that we have to, have the strength to go toe to toe with those people. And Kamala Harris ain't it. She's not gonna do it. She's not gonna do the job. Okay, so, but I'm gonna go ahead and end it here, guys. If anybody